Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. If you can hear me, please give me a thumbs up or say something just to let me know that you can hear me and that there's no funny business going on with the sound. I appreciate you all being here. I think this is going to be a fun one. We are going to be talking about a topic that is unfortunately very popular in the modern Christian community, including the Slavic community. Not reasons, not the least of which being the fact that Vlad Savchuk is a Ukrainian, from what I understand, but, he's within the Slavic community, and so one of the world's most well-known demon slayers also happens to be a Slav, and so there's a lot of impact that he has in the Slavic community. He's invited to a lot of conferences, well-known, respected, and so I want to talk about him and the guest that he had on his program. Before we kind of get going, I want to give a shout out to my sister-in-law who got me this Russ Reasons merch cup for Christmas. Unfortunately, it's one of a kind, but that's terrific. Now I've got a cup. And also wanted to mention that I do have a Patreon set up. There's a link in the bio or in the description of the video if you wanted to join and support and help offset the costs of the electricity for running this place. Yeah, it's there. Anyways, we're going to start with Bob Larson. If you've never heard of Bob Larson, he's quite a fellow, but let's hear what he has to say for himself. And I'm going to start this by teasing with a little bit of a teaser trailer here about spiritual spouses.
Spouse. 5 years ago or so, no one had even heard of the term, let alone what is a spiritual spouse. 5 years
What is a spiritual spouse?
ago or so, no one had even heard of the term.
I wonder why. 5 years ago, no one had heard of the term spiritual spouse. Christianity's been around here for, give or take 2,000 years. Somehow, we only discovered a phenomenon 5 years ago.
Let alone understand what it was. I wrote a book called Jezebel. I took this topic.
Ah, yes, Jezebel, the favorite topic of every demon hunter and demon adjacent hunter in modern Christendom. Even Mark Driscoll recently had a whole thing on Jezebel. As far as I know, he still goes on rants, really long rants about the Jezebel spirit. So everybody loves Jezebel.
Big head on. What I said was groundbreaking. No one in the Christian world had ever put in print any teaching on the concept of spiritual sex with a demon. It was taboo.
No one in the Christian world had put in print anything about sex with a demon. He's wrong. He is absolutely wrong about that. There are, going back as far as, I'm aware of Derek Prince writing about it decades ago. He was writing about spiritual spouses and succubuses. So that's made up.
My experience as an exorcist showed me that these episodes are very real and happening on a large scale. And not all of these individuals who claim such experiences were psychotically sexualized. Many such persons who came to me for help were normal, even devout Christians. They couldn't all.
Normal and devout Christians were having spiritual sex, and they came to him for help.
Be dismissed as erotically obsessed. Well, such things as this have been known for hundreds, thousands of years in the world of black magic, the occult, and pagan religion.
Yeah. So that's Bob Larson, the exorcist. And now we're going to hear
how do you break curses?
how do you break curses? We're going to hear Vlad's interview with him. And this
I had a
isn't the
lady
first
just come
one
to
he's
me a
done
couple
with
of
him.
days ago. She said, I went to every priest in my city. I went to every evangelical pastor in my city. Nobody would even talk to me. I talked to her 5 minutes and demons are popping up all over the place. Just because I listened. Pastors, many times, don't listen. They preach at the people. They're laying down the rules. They tell them the way it ought to be. They don't hear the way it is.
Well, guys, welcome to this episode. I am excited that you're joining us today. I believe today the scales are going to be removed.
I'm also excited, Vlad. The scales may be removed from our eyes.
From your eyes, and you're going to see that there are things behind this physical world. There's a spiritual world. The Bible talks about it. Today, I have the pleasure and the honor of having Dr. Bob Larson with us. He's no stranger.
The Bible does talk about spiritual things. We're going to see how much of what they say the Bible talks about, or how much they talk about the Bible.
Not only to my channel, but he's no stranger to many of you, as well as no stranger to the people who are exposed to the many of you as well.
This gentleman on the left you may recognize as Sid Roth and his show, It's Supernatural. A man that will host every Looney Tunes Christian that has ever disgraced the airwaves. We're talking about Kat Kerr, the lady that goes up to heaven and sits on God's lap while unicorns dance around. We're talking about the guy who had Jesus come into his room and played the saxophone for him. And he's also had Bob Larson on his show. So he'll talk to just about everybody and anybody, including Vlad Savchuk. He was on his show as well at one point.
Well, as no stranger to the people who are.
I will mention that when he was on his show, Vlad was telling him fairy tales about a girl at his church that was healed of paralysis. A story that he told on national television that he refuses to provide any sort of medical documentation for.
Are exposed to the ministry of deliverance and spiritual warfare. He's a man of God, he's a father, he's a husband, but most importantly, he's a demon slayer. He casts out demons. He's been featured on so many different networks, and he is the foremost authority on the topic of occult, witchcraft, deliverance. And he's not just somebody who studied these topics, but he's somebody who does this. Like just before this, I asked him a question, your scariest deliverance, and his answer is like, oh, I think that's the one that happened yesterday. So he's in the trenches. He's ministering to not only demonized people, he's ministering to pastors and leaders, deliverance ministers who are struggling with demons. Every single day he's doing that. And so he doesn't stop. And so today I have the privilege of having him, and I believe that open your heart, God's going to speak to you today in a powerful way. So Dr. Bob Larson, I'm glad that you're here today.
Thanks for the kind words. I can't wait to hear what I have to say.
Come on, somebody.
All right, so Vlad really hyped up this guy, and then I would like to point out this small detail here. If we go back
Today.
just a second.
God's going to speak to you today in a powerful way. So Dr. Bob Larson, I'm glad that you're here today.
Thanks for the kind words. I can't wait to
Dr. Bob Larson. And I can't believe Vlad almost has 2 million subscribers. The man he's getting the word out there. Dr. Bob Larson. Sounds pretty legit, right? So let's look and see, what is he the doctor of? And how did Dr. Bob Larson get his doctorate? This is Dr. Bob Larson's website. And if you guys are here and you're following along, I would let me know what university you think Bob Larson got his PhD from. Padla says Bob Larson is as much of a doctor as Dr. Kravchuk. If you are not familiar with the recent scandal that went through the Slavic community, there was a man who was asking young men to take their pants off during confession, and the excuse was that he was acting as an unlicensed urologist. So that's the inside joke there from Padla. But Dr. Bob Larson, he has the Spiritual Freedom Church. It is a Bob Larson ministry. And if we scroll down here where it talks about him, he is the foremost expert on cults, the occult, supernatural phenomenon. He's ministered on all these TV shows. He's written 50 different books. And over again, he's Dr. Larson over here, Dr. Larson over there. He's doctor everywhere. We get to the last paragraph. In recognition of his lifetime achievements, the Board of Governors of Spiritual Freedom Churches International, I will let you guess who started that group of churches and who runs that group of churches currently. If your guess is it's an exorcist, you would be right. So this Board of Governors and Bob Larson University awarded Reverend Larson the honorary title of Doctor of Divinity. So his own university, and university is a very loose term because university is, over here we can see, where was it? 2023. This is a university that has existed for a year. In 2023, Dr. Larson founded Bob Larson University, an online educational institution which includes 60 courses and more than 50 hours of video training. So there are more courses than there are hours of training, meaning if you sign up for a course, you get less than an hour of training in this course. And this university that has existed for less than a year awarded this man, and the university, which is just online classes that he himself made, this very university awarded him the honorary title of Doctor of Divinity. This is the person that Vlad Savchuk has on his channel and identifies as a Dr. Bob Larson. This man is as much of a doctor as I am. I would say I am probably more of a doctor than this guy. And lest we, are negligent, let's also look into the Spiritual Freedom Churches International that Bob Jones is the president of. A fellowship of associated and affiliated congregations adhering to Dr. Larson's vision of church bodies which embrace the message of salvation, spiritual healing, and deliverance. Or as Igor says, Dr. Seuss has more credibility. I believe so, yes. I don't know if it was the Cat in the Hat that gave Dr. Seuss the honorary doctorate, but even if that was the case, he would still have more credibility than this Dr. Larson character. So going back to the Spiritual Freedom Churches, clicked on the link, internationally affiliated congregation. The very first church happens to be listed as Oregon, USA, which that's my neck of the woods. And what's funny is they're actually in Washington. So, boy, even the directory, we're not off to a great start. But I looked up Shiloh Fellowship, pastored by Edra Hayes. This is Shiloh Fellowship here. Edra is an ordained deliverance minister for Spiritual Freedom Church and is also prayer support for Shiloh Fellowship. So, yeah, this is the kind of church we're talking about here from Dr. Larson. And then we have a Spiritual Freedom Church of Phoenix, where he is the pastor. And then we've got one in California. And then we've got one in Midland, Texas. But you don't even get an address for this so-called church. And then we move into some others down here where they are associated with them somehow. And you move down to like Florida, Jesus el Liberator, no address again. Jesus Christ Teaching Ministry. So none of these aren't churches anymore. These are just things that are loosely associated with Bob Larson. This is the board of governors that issued him his doctorate. As Padla says, I heard Monsters, Inc. University are thinking of giving Pastor Vlad a doctorate of exorcism. I am frankly surprised that Vlad doesn't have a doctorate yet from some of one of these institutions.
Hear what I have to say.
Come on, somebody. Could you take us to the beginning? How did everything begin for you? I remember reading your book, the very big book about Bob Larson's pretty much study on occults and false religions. And I don't know how long it took you to study that, but from what I've understood is that you were kind of going around different countries and learning about the occult, and before even you started to do deliverance. Can you take us to how you started with all of this?
Well, it's just started as a farm kid in Nebraska. Went to the University of Nebraska. I planned to go into medicine. I became a Christian. Felt a call to ministry. Had no idea what that would look like. Found a few pastors who would let me share my testimony. And then I signed up with a lecture agency and did motivational speaking for about 3 years, which developed some speaking skills.
My question is, what exactly was he speaking on? What was he a motivational speaker for? This was a dude that dropped out of school, out of university, after a couple of years, after he realized he's called to ministry. And now he's traveling doing motivational speeches. What qualifies him to motivate people? But I mean, from this we can tell that from a very young age, Bob Larson was in the field of telling stories. And he took that and he ran with it.
But I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I took off to see the world. In those days, you could buy a round-trip world ticket. Go anywhere you wanted to. Just keep going. Don't go backwards. Just keep going forwards. And
in those days, you could buy a ticket where you could go anywhere as long as you kept going forward and never going backwards. What is he What imaginary thing is he talking about? A ticket where you could just travel the world? Like no one's asking questions like, Bob, what are you talking about here, buddy?
I just went to dozens of countries all over the world, but I got a real shock when I got to Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, India, and so on. I saw demonic.
Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. He went to both, all three. He was just there, okay?
Rituals and ceremonies, and I didn't know what it was, didn't understand it, never heard anything about it, never saw anything like that, but I was intrigued by it, not in an unhealthy way, so I would.
And he ended up in these demonic ceremonies in every place he went. He went to Africa, demonic ceremonies. Went to Africa, we already said Africa. Africa, then the Middle East, then Asia, India. He's ending up in demonic ceremonies. Yeah, Igor's saying the money's got to flow, and it's got to flow. I mean, this video posted 2 weeks ago, it's already got 220,000 views. The money is flowing, guys. The ad revenue is coming in.
Would seek out these ceremonies and rituals, self-mutilation ceremonies, spirit.
He is seeking out self-mutilation ceremonies. Does this sound like the behavior of a believer, of a Christian person? He is in his early 20s, traveling all over the world. This is all according to him. Early 20s, traveling all over the world, seeking out self-mutilation ceremonies. Okay, yeah, that's normal. Nothing to worry about here.
Conjuration ceremonies, voodoo ceremonies. And in each of these cases, there was a common theme. And that was when you ask the people what's going on. because at some point they go into these seizures, they fall to the ground, they scream, they thrash about. They said, well, that is when our God enters into us. Now to them,
That's interesting that these people are thrashing about, screaming, and doing these things, which sounds a lot like what happens at some charismatic churches. That's a different topic.
that's a very positive thing. That's what they want. They want to be possessed by the gods. That's a very holy thing to them. So I thought, well, this looks like what the Bible calls demon possession. So I came back to the United States.
You thought. So, what is it with Christianity being so just, and like Christians in general, just being so open to hearing people telling fantastical, nonsensical stories and never providing any sort of pushback, never asking any sort of difficult question? Whether it be, the pastor whose sermons I review sometimes, where, they're sitting there telling stories and that clearly never happened as illustrations for something, and people don't push back on it and don't, just kind of believe them, take them at their word. Or this guy with this fantastical tale of discovering self-mutilation ceremonies in Africa.
It's continued on with what I was doing, and didn't think I would be an exorcist or anything like that. Until one night, I was speaking at a youth rally. They'd asked me to come and share my testimony because I'd been a professional musician and I'd come out of that kind of an interesting story. And so I spoke, shared my testimony. So I'm about ready to walk off the stage.
In all of this, when was he a professional musician? I missed that part. He was in college to be a doctor, and then he dropped out. He was a motivational speaker. Then he was traveling to self-mutilation ceremonies. When did he become a professional musician? We don't know, but let's keep going.
And a 15-year-old girl walked up to me, very haughtily, and she says, "I don't believe in your God." I said, "Really? Okay." And I'm packing up my guitar and my equipment. I'm ready to leave. But she caught my attention. And at that point, I said, "Well, why don't you believe in God? Do you believe in the devil?" "Oh, yeah." I said, "Why do you believe in the devil?" She just looked at me straight. She said, "This is a 15-year-old girl. I have sex with the devil." Okay, back then, that sort of thing would...
All right, chat, people in the comments, let me know. Is this a thing that actually happened? Was Bob Larson at some university as a motivational speaker, and a 15-year-old girl came up to him and told him that she was having sex with the devil? Is this a thing that actually happened? I'd love to hear from you guys. Maybe I'm just overly skeptical and cynical and just don't believe these people. What do you think? Yeah?
Never have been heard of. Nobody would have spoken about it. Rosemary's Baby hadn't even come out yet. I said, "Oh, well, let me talk to the devil you have sex with." We're off to the races. And this thing came up and talked about being a lover to her. Now, of course, people in deliverance ministries developed a theology about spiritual spouses, spiritual husbands, and that sort of thing. But nobody...
So he had a demonic interview right then and there with this demon that this girl was having spirit sex with. Where are these people getting this stuff? One time, Jesus asks a demon what its name is, and now, 2025, we have people, thanks to the likes of Bob Larson and Derek Prince and Vlad Savchuk, Isaiah Saldivar, Mike Signorelli, and all these other dudes, we have now developed a theology of demonic interviews. Vlad and Bob and all these dudes, they will ask the demons more questions than they ask their interview guests. They will try to get more information out of them than they do out of the person sitting across the table from them right now. Is this in the Bible? No, of course not. And it doesn't need to be, because these are just things that we've made up and that we're doing now.
We talked about that. Nobody knew anything about it, and I certainly didn't. But I spent the better part of that evening until early morning hours with this young woman. What was really interesting about it, though.
Okay, yeah. So he spent the evening and into the early morning hours with this 15-year-old girl. No comment.
Is right in the middle of it, she started speaking in a very distinct, high-class British accent. And the demon said he came from England, and that's why he spoke like that. So there was enough supernatural confirmation that I knew I was onto something, and then after that, not much happened. But then when I committed myself...
This was a British demon. It had an accent. Of course, do we see this in the Bible anywhere, that demons acquire accents based on the place that they, quote-unquote, live in? And do their accents change over time, right? Because unless these guys have a new idea and theory of who demons are and where they came from, demons have existed long before there was an England. So do they just kind of travel with people and then pick up their languages and pick up their accents? Just now. Okay, sure. Yeah, we'll take your word for it.
Was she delivered, or?
Well, as far as I know, she was delivered. I never know what happened to her. I didn't.
Roman is asking important questions. I would say this is a real concern. What if you were ministering to a white person and they were possessed by a demon that grew up in the hood and they started saying the N-word? Would that be okay for that white person to do, or would that be racist? Or as Peter points out, and this is something we talked about in a previous video, we know that there's a demon employment office. As new sins come up and old sins transition away, demons have to get reassigned, right? It used to be the demon of, like, I don't know, well, what's a good one? Carriage, like a horse carriage, obsession. But horse carriages went away, so that those demons were unemployed. But now we have new sins with modern technology, centered around the internet. So all those demons can then get put into different jobs around that industry. So if there's an employment office, then clearly they do travel, and I'm sure they pick up different accents and such.
I didn't even know to get a name and address back then to follow up. I've never known what happened to this woman. I mean, we cast it out. I had another gentleman there who had seen some missionaries do this and talk about it, so he jumped in to help me out. But
did you have like any understanding even? I mean, you already knew how to, you asked the question, hey, I need to speak to the devil that's inside of you. So you had some framework of deliverance and expelling demons out of people. But
not from a book.
And you also are not coming from charismatic background.
No, nothing. And so here I just, I just walked through this. I knew I needed.
See, the question Vlad should have asked is, hey, Bob, how did you know to ask to speak to the demon? You claim you have no background in this. You claim that you had no experience with any of this. Why did you ask to speak to the demon? That would have been a good question to ask. But it's all these leading questions because Vlad buys into all of this. Obviously, this is his bread and butter. Vlad and he openly talks about this, is that he spent the first decade of his ministry just preaching the gospel, and it got him nowhere. He was just faithfully ministering in the small church in Tri-Cities, Washington, preaching the word of God, and it got him nowhere. As soon as he went to Africa, saw TB Joshua and started and brought over that style of ministry to America and started copying him and emulating him, suddenly Vlad goes, and his whole ministry goes to the moon. Now, the fact that TB Joshua turned out to be, to have a harem of women that he was holding against their will, and that he was doing things to, and that we're not going to talk about. But yeah, Vlad, this is Vlad's income. So obviously, the more fantastical the story, the better.
To tell that thing to go, and then it wouldn't go, and well, why won't you go? And it was just trial and error. I did the best that I possibly could. But that was my introduction. That's a pretty significant introduction. And so nothing happened for a while, actually a couple of years. But then when I made the commitment to go into ministry, and I started to travel around the country speaking and basically sharing my testimony, I wasn't really a preacher. Again, people would come up to me and start talking about supernatural things. You know, one of the turning points in my life was when another young girl comes walking up to me.
Why is it always young girls walking up to him?
And she said, "Would you just pray with me?" And I said, "Sure, what do you want me to pray about?" And I would guess she was about 15 or 16.
Another 15-year-old girl. Okay.
She said, "I compulsively masturbate and can't stop."
Oh, okay then. Yeah. So, first 15-year-old girl came to him. She was having sex with a demon. This 15-year-old girl comes to him and says she does that. Okay, yeah, so 2 stories so far out of Bob Larson. Both involve underage girls doing sexual activity. All right.
And I said, "Okay, well, when did this start?"
That's the question you ask? 15-year-old girl comes to you. It seems like most of the people in the comments are guys. Guys, you are an adult. You're a man in your 30s. Underage girl comes to you and starts and tells you that. What's the question that you ask? Are you asking her when it started?
When I found my father's pornography. Now, I did not know at the time that the father was a deacon in the church where I was speaking. That's another whole can of worms.
They didn't fill out the questionnaires.
No questionnaires, nothing. So I just said, "Okay, I'll try to help you."
Oh my goodness.
So it was a series of cases like that. I had no demonology. I had no construct. I had no theological.
What does he mean by "I'm gonna try my best to help you"? Like, what did he do? We don't know. That doesn't matter. The stories he's telling are not about sharing any useful information. It's just gratuitous, weird, underage fantasy land is what we're getting from Bob over here. Dr. Bob from Bob Larson University. And it does sound like Bob has a type, which is 15-year-old girls. And it's interesting because I read another article that was talking about the fact that Bob currently travels the country with very young girls. They're not underage technically. They are, I believe, 18 and 19-year-old girls. His daughter and 2 of her friends, I believe. And they are his demon dynamic trio. traveling the country with him doing demon exorcism.
Framework to work from. And at that time, there weren't any books. Nobody talked about this. So I just did what I could, and then it developed from there.
Yeah, I remember when I just came to the United States, and my pastor, who's my uncle, he watched you on TBN.
Yeah.
I think you were coming like Monday, 10 p.m. They put you like at that time when all the demonized people probably need help, like very late into the day. And so he discovered your program, and he would constantly tell.
Here's another question for you guys. Why would it matter what time it is for demons? Are demons like nocturnal creatures? Why would it matter what time of the day or night it is? Unless our quote-unquote theology, or in this case is demonology, is based not on scripture, but on things we saw in movies and cartoons.
Tell us to tune in. And we were like 13 and a half, 14 years of age, and very hungry for the spiritual, supernatural world. But that was strange. I remember first time watching it, I was like, what is he doing? What is this man doing with the cross? And then, you at the end of the program, you would have your next seminars. So, and you would frequently come to Portland and Seattle.
Yeah.
So I still remember that in the back of my head. Our pastor takes the van, loads us in, and we're like 13 and a half years of age.
Yeah, so this is a pastor of a church exposing his 13 and 14-year-olds to Bob Larson and his demonology. Okay.
And we're going to go see Bob Larson. and all of us are like so intrigued and then scared at the same time, because I mean we had demons, we just didn't want those demons to come out yet because we didn't fully understand what was happening. And the first time that I came to one of your seminars, I meet a guy there who has a hole in his tongue, and a demon that has been passed on from one generation to another marks each generation by making a physical hole in their tongue.
Here's another story that I'm sure did not happen. I'm sure this did not happen, Vlad. There was no hole in the tongue. It's one thing. I sympathize with these guys a little bit, but they seem to be working around it. So what I'm trying to say is, it used to be that you would hear about all of these fantastical stories, and there was really no way to have evidence of it. Today, literally every single person in America has a high-definition camera with them at all times. So you would think that these magical things that are happening, supposedly, in these ministries, are being captured with these devices. For some reason, they are not. And for some reason, that doesn't bother the people that follow these ministries. I don't know why that is.
So he's telling this story to us. This is before the seminar, and I'm standing there and I was like, oh my goodness, this stuff is real. And it marked me, because then this person starts to manifest during the seminar. And, this was first time being in the church service. I grew up in the Pentecostal church, so I've seen pretty interesting things that interrupt the services. But usually it's somebody breaks out in tongues or something. I've just never seen somebody breaks out yelling and screaming, and you didn't see that as an interruption. You actually almost like looked forward to it.
Oh, yes,
you stopped
absolutely.
your sermon and you go up to that person. It was not a large room. It was about maybe 70 or 100 people. And then it just went on. And those things that I saw on television and then now on YouTube channel, it was happening right in front of my eyes. And that...
Another thing I often wonder about is all of the people that come to these all the demon-possessed people that come to the exorcist conferences. Like, this is a conference specifically intended and meant for casting demons out of people. If the demon is inside this person, I assume it's because they want to be there. No one is forcing the demon to be there, right? The demon's not being held against his will or its will. The demon can get up and go at any point. So why does the demon go to an exorcism conference? What possesses the demon to go to a conference where it's going to get exorcised out of the Christian against the demon's will, or out of this person? Like, just the level of, you have to turn off your brain. The only way these ministries make sense is if you love to hear stories and you are okay with just turning off your brain and seeing fantastical things happen. This is great. Vlad, Savchuk, Bob Larson, all these dudes, this is the place for you. So let's move on to, what do you tell people who say Christians cannot have demons?
Say to people who say that Christians cannot have demons?
Well, first of all, the people who say that.
Notice how up to this point, and granted, we did skip a section of this video, but up to this point, there has been no mention of the Bible, no mention of Scripture, no Bible verses, nothing. Nothing that would suggest that any of this is based in Scripture. But now we come to a place where very obviously Scripture would have to be used to make this case. So let's see if that's what happens.
Don't do deliverance.
Okay.
They don't actively do deliverance. Do you know anybody in deliverance who believes that? Of course not. Because the people who come to them and...
So the argument is, if you're not doing deliverance ministries, then obviously you don't know any better. All the people in deliverance ministries know that Christians have demons. That's why we're doing deliverances. That would be like saying, you are not a unicorn wrangler, and therefore, of course, you don't think unicorns exist. But I wrangle unicorns. That's what I do for a living, and therefore, obviously, unicorns exist. That's not an argument, sir. This is how you have made a living. This is how you have made money. This is how you have become famous for, in the last 50 years. Of course, there is an incentive for you to believe that Christians can have demons, because non-Christians, unbelievers, aren't going to Bob Larson exorcism conferences. What dude living his life, just some random atheist, Buddhist, Muslim, Hindu, whatever religion other than Christianity you can think of, is sitting there and one day decides, you know what, I'm going to go to a Bob Larson conference and I'm going to get exorcised, or I'm going to Hungry Generation for some exorcism. The only people that ever go to them are Christians. And when you are a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you are an exorcist, everything looks like a demon.
As demons are Christians for the most part. 99% of them probably, right? So there would be no deliverance ministries of any kind. God has raised it up with you and some other great 99%.
Actually, I think I missed something
they
important.
don't actively don't do deliverance.
Okay.
They don't actively do deliverance. Do you know anybody in deliverance who believes that? Of course not. Because the people who come to them and manifest demons are Christians for the most part. 99% of them probably.
There you go. 99% of the people that come to Bob Larson are Christians. So if Christians couldn't have demons, Bob Larson would be out of a job. And therefore, obviously, Christians have to have demons.
Right? So there would be no deliverance ministries of any kind. God has raised it up with you and some other great deliverance ministries. You guys have nothing to do in that particular realm if Christians couldn't have demons. All right.
Wow, 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 wow. He just came out and said it, didn't he? Vlad Savchuk would have nothing to do. There would not be a YouTube channel with almost 2 million subscribers if there were no demons in Christians.
Secondly, it is an ethnocentric, xenophobic, Americanized, westernized system of belief.
It's ethnocentric, xenophobic system of belief. If you believe that Christians, people who are indwelt by God, by the Holy Spirit, cannot also be indwelt by demons, if you don't believe this, it's because you are xenophobic. You are afraid of other people who are not of your tribe or nation, or you're scared of them, or you are focused on your ethnicity. What ethnicity does Bob Larson think Vlad is? Okay, so notice we've had two arguments so far. Neither one of them had anything to do with the Bible. Let's continue.
Okay. The Catholic Church doesn't believe that, and they were doing it a long time before we did it. Nobody in significant ministry in Africa believes that. They don't believe it in India. They don't believe it in Asia. In non-Westernized, non-Caucasian cultures, they don't believe that. Slavic culture.
The Catholic Church has never taught that Christians can be possessed. The African ministries, if we can call them that are doing these exorcisms, well, you've seen those African ministries. They are the ministries of people like T.B. Joshua, who were definitely, T.B. Joshua was definitely not a believer and was definitely possessed. So if there was going to be any sort of exorcism, it should have happened on T.B. Joshua. Unfortunately, instead of casting demons out of T.B. Joshua, people like Vlad Savchuk and Bob Larson were traveling to T.B. Joshua's church to be anointed by him and take back his holy water back to America.
Cultures don't believe that. They know that. We in America live in a theological bubble. This is what people don't understand. Wow. Okay.
We live in a theological bubble. Sure, Bob. Bob, you have a degree from Bob Larson University.
Theological frame of reference of America is basically European, but it's an Americanized version of that only goes back a few centuries. Doesn't go back very far. All right? So our experience in America has been...
Our theology only goes back a few centuries. Now, if you are Pentecostal, then yeah, potentially you're going back to Azusa Street, and so you're not even a couple of centuries. If you are of any sort of historical church tradition that goes back before that, then in theory, you're going back to at least the Reformers, right? If you're a Protestant. So, sure, bro. Sure. Dr. Bob of Bob Larson University, tell us about where our theology comes from.
And as a protected culture, a couple of oceans.
We have Misha here. Finally, someone who is a defender of the demon-slaying cult. Read the Gospel of Mark, where he talks about Christ's first miracle. It's about a demon-possessed believer in the synagogue that God delivered. Nowhere saying that the person that was in the synagogue was a believer is like saying somebody that was at church is a believer. That is like saying that someone who was standing inside of a garage is a car. Your location does not determine your salvation. Does that make sense? I have no problem with Bob saying you can have people in the church that are not believers, who are demon-possessed, and who need deliverance. If you want to say that, that is perfectly fine. You cannot find in the Bible a single example of a single person who was indwelt by the Holy Spirit who was also indwelt by demons. You cannot find it, and that's why people like this, when they are asked this question, they do not go to the Bible.
And theistic people who founded the country. There was a wall against evil. This didn't exist in the rest of the world. So for millennia, and
we have to go back. What just happened?
there was a wall. And, all right, so our experience in America has been as a protected culture by a couple of oceans and theistic people who founded the country. There was a wall against evil.
So because people like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and Ben Franklin were theists, that means we had a wall. We had a demon wall, guys. There was a demon wall that was protecting all the white people in America from the demons. And that's why we don't have a theology of demon-possessed Christians. Oh, nice. We got another one. If Paul said not to give a foothold to the devil, it implies that you as a believer can give a foothold to the devil. Read Ephesians, brother. I appreciate the comment, DS. Now, may I ask you, in the Greek, does foothold mean possessed? Does it mean demonic possession? Because if it does, then sure, you've won your case. Paul says, don't let yourself get possessed by the devil. Unfortunately for you, foothold there does not mean demonic possession. That's why no translation translates it as demonic possession or indwelling of demons. Ephesians is the one text that the demon slayers and their followers desperately cling to try to make something out of it. When it's not there, as our almost president, Hillary Clinton, once said, there is no there, guys. There isn't. That's why none of these demon slayers go there. Or when they do, there's nothing there.
This didn't exist in the rest of the world. So for millennia, and certainly for hundreds of years, they have had to deal with demons. And then as Christianity came, they had to deal with the reality that when someone became a Christian, they had to get rid of their demons to walk with God. This never developed in American theology, which was essentially Calvinist-based. And as a result,
American theology was Calvinist-based, guys. Now, if you ask Dr. Bob what is Calvinism and how American theology is Calvinist-based, he wouldn't be able to tell you. He would just be able to tell you that the Calvinists really don't agree with any of the nonsense he spews, and therefore he knows that whatever Calvinism is, it's against what he believes.
people were able to keep it out of their field of vision. So the people who say that can't happen, from the pulpit, on the internet, in churches, they're absolutely isolated from the reality of what's going on in people's lives. They don't know.
pastors that are faithfully ministering to the people in their churches, they're completely isolated from what's going on in people's lives. But you know, Bob, you, the traveling exorcist, you know what's going on in people's lives. Okay, sure, Jan. First of all. Second of all, I would also like to point out somebody like Vodi Bakum, who was until recently the president of a Christian university in Zambia, I believe, in Africa. He was ministering there. And he is not of the same ethnicity as you are, Dr. Bob. And Vodi would strongly disagree with you. But, of course, it's probably because Vodi is Calvinist.
They're pontificating from a pulpit. They're standing there in their little ivory tower, and I don't mean to say this denigratively, but that is the reality of what they're doing. And
that's pretty denigratingly. And that's how you describe the pastoral ministry that faithful men in the church in America are doing every day. They're standing in their ivory tower. That's how Bob Larson sees pastors of churches.
And they don't deal with the messiness of the world. For one thing.
And Vlad is sitting there and says, yeah, that's good, yeah.
They don't counsel. They don't pastor. They don't minister.
They don't counsel. They don't pastor. They don't minister. Bob, what are you talking about, dude? This, like Yuri's saying over here, what is... How do you put yourself in such a place to where you are so far above all these people who have been put into their ministries and who serve in those ministries faithfully? No, bro, you're Bob. Dr. Bob is gonna rebuke all of you for failing to pastor and minister.
To her. Now, I know it's hard to do, especially if you're a successful pastor. It's hard to find the time to do that. But you got to stay in touch with human need. And if you stay in touch with human need, where you're going to have good Christian people coming to you with junk experiences. Why is this happening to me? You're going to have a nice Christian woman say, I have to tell you, Pastor, I'm being raped at night, and I don't know why. Now, of course,
this is the third demon story we've gotten. And again, it is a woman. This time, thankfully, it's a woman. So I assume of age. But again, it's a woman with an sexual problem. I don't want to, make false accusations against a man. But if I was unkind in my judgment of Dr. Bob, I would warrant that this man has an unhealthy fascination with women and their sexual activities.
that's really not going to happen because she's never going to tell him because she knows he wouldn't listen.
Wow.
So the possibility...
Wow, says Vlad. Wow. Yeah, Dr. Bob. But you would listen, wouldn't you, Dr. Bob? You'd like to listen. You'd like to hear all about this woman's RAPE at night from a demon.
The ministry to somebody who has demons and is a Christian has been precluded. Do you know any Christian who has a demon who's going to walk up to John MacArthur after he's preached on Sunday morning and say, is there any way you could pray?
Oh, snap. Bob Larson calls out John MacArthur.
Deliverance for me? Of course not. It's precluded. Mm-hmm. But he's a good man of God. He's done wonderful things for the Lord, except he ripped me up on national television one time, but I forgive him for that.
I mean, it doesn't sound like you forgave him for it. It sounds like you're still a little bit bitter there, Bob. You you're on a podcast with 2 million subscribers, and you took the opportunity to throw MacArthur under the bus there, to get a little jab in there. So it sounds like maybe you're still a little salty about what MacArthur said about you, and I'm sure what MacArthur said about you was spot on.
Mm-hmm. So this is the trap.
And you get these people coming to you
They
from
come
those
to me.
churches.
I had a lady just come
Another lady. Okay, fourth demon story, another lady. Let's hear. Is it going to be sexual?
to me a couple of days ago. She said, I went to every priest in my city. I went to every evangelical pastor in my city. Nobody would even talk to me. I talked to her in 5 minutes and demons are popping up all over the place. Just because I listened. I listened. Pastors, many times, don't listen.
I think David's asking a good question here, which is it even possible to help someone who is this deeply deceived? I think what happens is you have situations where people have a very strong interest in not having their minds changed about something. In the case of Bob Larson, for him to go back on the things that he has been teaching and practicing for the last 50 years, one, would lose him access to all the underage girls and their stories of sexual sin, and two, his income. This is what he's made a living off of, a very comfortable living off of for the last, however many years, 40 years. Speaking of which, let's look and see what would happen if we needed help. Now, Bob, he's doing this out of the goodness of his heart, right? Or, for just kind of, he's there to help people. It sounds like people are just coming to him and they're going everywhere else and they can't find help, so they come to Bob. Let's see what it would look like if you wanted to talk to Bob. In-person spiritual encounter, 50 minutes, $695. Discover root issues that have hindered your success in every area of life. Break curses, experience freedom, and find your true purpose in life as Bob prays with you. Guys, I went to talk to a lawyer who had a private practice, who had been a practicing lawyer for 30-some years, who had a Juris Doctorate from a real university, not a Bob Larson university, and I paid, I believe it was $395 for the hour. It might have been $495, but I want to say it was $395 for an hour with a lawyer who was a real doctor of law. You want to talk to Dr. Bob? It's $700 for not even an hour. Now, if you're okay with the B team, your demon's not that bad, you can talk to Bob's helper for $395. Someone trained by Bob would be happy to help you for $400 for not a full hour. So yeah, do you think Bob has an interest in changing his theology when he admitted that 99% of the people that come to him are Christians, and he is charging them $700 an hour to talk to them? Dude, I would be casting demons out of Christians for that kind of money. All right. Misha is telling us we got to read Matthew 12:43. Let's read Matthew. Oh, where were we here? Bible. I'm going to pull it up on the screen just so we can all read it together. Matthew 12. Yeah, if once the Patreon is at a large enough number, that will be a fun little thing to do. Like David's saying, do do one of these $700 exorcism sessions. Maybe just do it with one of the associates, we don't got to be too fancy with it. Let me see. All right. Where were we supposed to be looking at over here? Misha told us to read chapter 12. Sorry, guys. I have too many things pulled up, and so it's just being difficult for me now. Matthew 12. 43. All right. Perfect. Let me pull up Matthew 12. And then switch this over to Logos. Oh, hello, Logos. Aha. Now, when the unclean spirit goes out of a man, it passes through waterless places, seeking rest, and does not find it. Then it says, I will return to my house, from which I came. And when it does, it finds it occupied, swept, and put in order. Then it goes and takes along with it 7 other spirits more wicked than itself, and they go in and live there. And the last state of that man becomes worse than the first. That is the way it will be with this evil generation. So this is a parable that Jesus is telling. The question is, what does this parable mean? And how does this answer the question of, can a Christian be demon-possessed? You're going to have to explain that to me, Misha. Because what I'm seeing here is that this is a parable that has something to do with the evil generation of that is Jesus is speaking to. This doesn't seem to be about demonic possession, first. But second of all, say it is about demonic possession. Let's make it that. Not a parable. We have an image of demon leaving a man. What are waterless places? And why is it seeking rest there? Why is it not finding rest? What does that have to do with demons? What does that tell us about demons? We don't know. Bible doesn't tell us. Then the demon is saying, I will return to my house from which I came. And when the demon comes back, it finds it unoccupied, swept, and put in order. What does that mean? Who swept the house and who put it into order? And then it comes back with more demons. Now, like Padla is pointing out here, and this is, whenever anyone wants to make this about demonic possession, where I always go with this or kind of point out the fact is the word unoccupied, right? Found unoccupied. And that is the whole premise of my claim. As a believer, you are not unoccupied. The Bible clearly teaches that the Holy Spirit lives in you. That's so, again, if this parable is actually speaking about demonic possession, the fact that you are not unoccupied as a believer means that this does not apply to you. And then here, Misha says, I agree, if you're living a holy life, you have protection. But if you don't, then you could open up to demonic influence. Demonic influence is not demonic possession. If you are being influenced by a demon, you don't need exorcism. Exorcism means to cast out, meaning it has to be in, right? That's what these people are practicing. They are practicing casting out something that is in you. First of all. Second of all, well, I don't even want to get into the whole thing with open doors and how you can make room for that. We've already been at this for too long, guys, and we're going to wrap up here. But anyways, the point here that I wanted to show you was that Dr. Bob is not doing exorcism as out of the goodness of his heart. He is charging twice as much as a lawyer for you to see him.
Ouch. They preach at the people. They're laying down the rules. They tell them the way it ought to be. They don't hear the way it is in the real world for the common person. In our world of exploding internet porn.
We're back to that. Everything with Dr. Bob is about sex.
The dramatic explosive growth of the New Age and so on. They don't hear these people.
Do you see that the wall that we had before when this country was founded has its cracks now, with so many young people exposed to witchcraft, the occult becoming almost domesticated, almost common in our generation? What would you say?
Anyways, there's more to it. I feel like I could do a part 2 on it. There's some more good stuff in here about generational curses and other stuff. But as you can see here, this entire section, can Christians have demons? Not one mention of a single Bible verse, not one mention of even a biblical idea or some kind of teaching of Scripture. It's just, I had some woman come to me and tell me about her sins, and y'all are xenophobic if you don't believe in demon exorcism casting out. And there you go. And the whole time, Vlad's sitting there, and yes, Misha, I'm glad you asked whether I am familiar with Derek Prince's teaching. Check out my Instagram. I have a whole section of highlights where I go through Derek's book and I point out the nonsense that he teaches. I am very familiar with Derek Prince. I have read all of his books as they relate to demonology, because Derek can really be considered the father of the modern demon-slaying movement. The vast majority of what these people are teaching and preaching today came directly from Derek Prince. They are copying him word for word in some cases. You'll see Vlad will put out a video where he'll say 10 signs you have a demon, and it's the same exact list that is in Derek Prince's book. So yes, I am very familiar with Derek. Derek is the original, the OG of the fairy storytellers. And funny enough, he has a very similar story to Bob Larson about traveling around Africa and seeing all these people doing all these ceremonies. So again, Derek takes Bible verses and rips them completely out of context and does the most inappropriate things to those Bible verses to make them try to say things that they absolutely do not say. And I don't know if Derek is doing it because he didn't know any better, because Derek Prince did not actually have a theological education, same as Dr. Bob, strangely enough, same as Vlad Savchuk, same as Mike Signorelli, same as Isaiah Saldivar, same as whoever else. None of these dudes have a seminary degree, but they are all going to be teaching us about how our theology is too white here in America. But yes, Derek Prince, OG heretic of the demon hunter movement, and unfortunately people read his books, they believe the stories, they do not judge what he says based on Scripture, and we now have an entire movement that came out of it. I thank you all for being here this long. It is late. Good night to you. God bless. Stay away from the demon slayers, and if you enjoyed the video, share it with some people. Leave some likes, sub, comment, do all those good things. If you're feeling generous, sign up for the Patreon. God bless, and good night.